Hello, everybody, and welcome into my latest live broadcast. Today is the 14th of July, 2020. My name is Carey Holzman, and been a couple days since I've been able to broadcast. Things have been a little crazy over here, certainly with the pandemic. Arizona and Texas, I think, are two of the big hotspots in Florida, in the United States, and they're reclosing everything all over again. I think this may be the death blow to a lot of businesses, and also trying to get the second studio location up and running. And it's just been a lot going on over here. So I apologize for my absence, but lots and lots of content in the works. And thank you guys so much for joining me. Looking in the chat, I see a couple of contributions have already been made. So let me give some shout outs to these kind folks. First off, with David Griswold with a $10 contribution. He says, "Hello, Carey. A little something to help out my favorite content creator." Okay, fine. The best and most informative content creator. Is that putting it on a little heavy? You deserve it all and more. You're too kind, David. Thank you. Randall Doms with $20. Hey, thank you, Randall. He says, "I love your videos." And of course, Michael Dane. He says, "Here's $10 for your Coke and Gatorade." Thank you. You're the man. No, you're the man. Thanks, Michael. Thanks to all of you and all my friends in blue. Also, a couple of things have arrived in the mail the last couple of days, and I want to share with you what some folks have sent in. We've got, oh gosh, where do I start? Today I got this in the mail from hold on, I have to look at who it's from. This is from Patrick Russo. That's what I thought it was, but I didn't want to say it out loud. Till I knew. These are door hangers that say on air. This is to avoid somebody interrupting. Unfortunately, I don't have any doors, anywhere around where I'm broadcasting in the space. In fact, even in the other studio location, there's no doors. It's pretty much a big open space. It's not a bedroom. So, while I appreciate the thought, unfortunately, I don't have any place to hang those. Included is a letter, and it says, "I hope things are going well for you and the missus." And speaking of the missus, I noticed on one of your latest live streams with Mitch, this lovely lady came into the kitchen picking up after you two with the look on her face. Worse than the teenagers when you said you were live and she looked like a deer caught in headlights. So I found these little signs that may prevent that in the future. Well, I wish I had some doors. I could have just closed the door. He says, "I sent you 4 of them because I think Lyle might mistake it for his chew toy if it falls on the floor by mistake. Thanks again for all you do in this crazy world." And it's from Patrick Russo. Patrick, thank you for that. I appreciate it. I'll have to figure out something I can do about that. I was looking through this latest edition of Maximum PC Magazine, and I think somebody there is watching my channel. The reason I say that is they have this article that says 8 seriously gaudy PC components. And they start with number 8 with the Cougar computer, which I unveiled here a couple of weeks ago. This cooler that we're going to explore more today. We go down a little further. They've got the Leon Lee PC train case, and of course the G-Skill Royal Z RAM, which, by the way, as gaudy as that RAM is, it's really not as gaudy as other RAM. I'm not sure that that's fair, because I will say that the RAM so far has been 100% compatible with no issues on both AMD and Intel systems I've used it on. And that alone makes it worth, as far as I'm concerned, a few extra dollars. But you're going to see more of that RAM coming up here. There's also a great article in here I want to get to a little later about what some motherboard manufacturers are basically overclocking your CPU without telling you and doing it by default, which is a real serious and can be a very serious issue. There'll be more on that coming up. Also, I had built a system for Mike Smith at Tech Vets and the Mike Tech Show, and when he received it in Florida, he wasn't getting any video out of it. And we went through a number of steps and determined that this isn't the best video card for him. Mike is still using, it seems as though, from what I understand, Mike knows a guy, and he's buying monitors that don't have HDMI inputs. They're quality Samsung monitors, but I believe they're a model from about 6 years ago. And although they're still sold today, I believe they were introduced to the market about 6 years ago. I could be off on that. And they're the same monitors he uses for his clients, so he wants to use the same stuff he sells his customers. And they only have, I think they've got DVI and DisplayPort, and that's all they've got, which is weird to me. So when I buy a monitor, I always make sure it has HDMI. It's very important to me. Mike never uses HDMI. And we had this initial problem again when I mailed him the system about a year ago. Same issue. He had no way to plug it in. So he has to get adapters to go from DisplayPort to HDMI. I think the back of the video card, well, I've got it in my hands. I think it's 2 HDMI and 1 DisplayPort. And a lot of times these adapters are junk. Yeah, so for me, that's a great video card, 2 HDMI and DisplayPort, which I would be using the 2 HDMI. But if either your HDMI cable is older, and when I say older, I don't mean you just went on Amazon and you bought it yesterday. I mean if its design is an older standard, and especially with your DisplayPort, what version of cable do you have? How much data can it transfer? You may have issues with that cable synchronizing with your monitor. I've also seen some cheaper monitors, like Spectre monitors, that if you've got it plugged in with a DisplayPort cable, and you turn the computer on first and the monitor on second, there's no video. You have to shut the whole computer down. Even though the computer's booted into Windows, it doesn't see a monitor attached. So I'm not sure what's going on with the DisplayPort issues, and it still could be, in my testing, it still could be a cable issue. So regardless, Mike really needs a video card that has DisplayPorts on them. So he can go straight through with DisplayPort right to the back of his Samsung monitors. And the reason why Mike uses those is he sells Dell computers to his clients. And if you noticed on the Dell giveaway computers that I do here, they don't have HDMI ports on the back of them. They're either DisplayPort or VGA only. So I believe the monitors he's buying do pair up well with Dell computers. But with a homemade computer, not that there's anything wrong with these monitors, just that they're an older model, and I think they're more designed for pre-built machines. It doesn't make it good or bad, it's just an observation. So I just told Mike, look, if I advised Mike to get different cables, and he just flat out refused. He just wouldn't listen. So I said, fine, buy another. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I'm 2,000 miles away, so find another video card, go to Best Buy, pick it up, Staples, whatever, and slap it in there and see if it solves the problem. But I told him, I said, even if it solves your problem using the same cables, it doesn't mean that it was the video card. It doesn't make sense to me how this graphics card could work perfectly, and I put it in a box and I ship it, and it arrives perfect condition, no problems, and now suddenly the video card doesn't work. So this just came back to me today, and I want to test it, and I hope it doesn't work. It's not my job to embarrass anybody, but this is the kind of stuff that when you're self-employed, customers can quickly put you out of business if this continues to happen, right? You can't sit there and keep taking back good product because your customer is using bad cables, right? Or when I say bad cables, I mean older cables. Now, I could be completely wrong. This video card, like I said, I hope it's bad. I hope I see what Mike saw. Then I can send it back to EVGA for warranty replacement. But what you have to understand is when you're self-employed and you're the only employee working, stuff like this pulls you backwards. Now I can't move on to the next project. I got to figure this out. If this works, it goes back in inventory. If this doesn't work, I got to go online, create an RMA, box it up, ship it out. All of that is costing me time and money, which is very precious when I'm the only employee. One way or the other, it has to be dealt with. It's too much money to just toss it aside. It's a little over $200. And Mike was able to get a video card with more display ports, and I think even a DVI out, which matches his monitors better. And I'll know if Mike wants to order a machine in the future to avoid HDMI. My life is all about HDMI, all about broadcasting. Everything is HDMI. So Mike and I are in two opposite worlds on that, and I didn't remember it from last time, and apparently neither did he. So we're going to look at that a little bit later. But I want to get back to some other things. So that came in the mail today. What also arrived in the mail was a big box which was significantly damaged, and it came from England, and it was it's a Corsair 200R case. You've seen me use these numerous times. And this comes from Rick Hubbard in Leicester, England, and He sent me this case, which must have cost a bundle to ship it. And inside of the case, he put in my favorite bunch of packages of Walker's smoky bacon flavored crisps or potato chips in there. So that's a nice thing to receive in the mail. So thank you to Rick. That was very thoughtful, very kind of you to send that. I'm sure it wasn't, the most financially sound thing to ship. I was really concerned because the box was just looked like it had been in shipping for 16 months. Like it just looked like it had been beaten. But it was packed. The case was put in its original box, and it protected it. So the case, as you can see, is fine. I won't be reusing the box. So a couple other contributions have come in while I've been talking here. So a couple of shots out. Darren Gilholm with a £1 contribution. Thomas Tidwell with a $25 contribution. Jeremy Kramer contributes $20, says, hey, Carey, great content as usual. How old of a processor have you seen Windows 10 work well on? Jeremy, you just did a few more of those giveaway computers. And some of those are like Pentium Gs, I want to say. So as far back as Pentium, I don't think Windows 10 really cares so much about the processor as it does about the BIOS. And that's really where your concern and focus needs to be, is on the motherboard, not so much the processor. I will say if a machine is more than 8 years old, maybe 10 years old for sure, I wouldn't even try it, because if it loads, it's going to be so slow. And off-lease computers are so inexpensive. You can buy an off-lease computer for $150 or less. That's an i5 with 8 gigs of RAM and a DVD. And it'll come with Windows 10 on it already. And Windows 10 retail is about $200. So for less than the price of Windows 10, not only do you get Windows 10 retail, but you also get, well, it's not the retail version of Windows 10, but you get a copy of Windows 10 Professional 64-bit with a whole computer. So trying to keep some of this older technology alive can be a real pain in the butt, as I've explained with the video cards and cables, right? And older model monitors. There's a potential there for incompatibilities, and there's a familiarity with wanting to stick to parts that you're familiar with, but there gets to be a point where those older parts are now causing you headaches and grief. So the idea of staying with something familiar may actually be causing you more harm than good after a certain period of time has elapsed. Bill Thomas has contributed $10 and Chris Keegan with $5. Chris wants to know how I'm doing. Just keep him busy, Chris. Hope you're doing well. Thank you all for the contributions. And David Griswold again with a $5 contribution. Said, Carey, this was posted in chat. Said, hey, Carey, I am Matt's wife. Matt who? He used to watch you, but I would like you to know that he passed away back on May 30th. I'm sorry to hear that. I have a lot of viewers named Matt, so I don't know which Matt it is. I'm so sorry for your loss. I never quite know what to say. When I will avoid funerals just for the awkwardness of not knowing what to say. My attitude is just that it sucks. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It just sucks. But be that as it may, thank you for bringing that to my attention, David, and thank you, Matt's wife, for letting me know. Yeah, Grant from Mythbusters died yesterday, 49 years old, had an aneurysm, brain aneurysm. Matthew Bleichart was his name. Oh, okay. Yeah, I remember Matthew. I remember him being in here. Well, we can change his name to Blue. And yeah, it's I don't know what to say. But again, thank you for letting me know, and yeah. Sort of lost my train of thought now. Okay, so what do I have in here? What is this? Oh, a gentleman sent me these lights for working on computers, sorry, I can't think of who sent these to me now. My brain just went blank. But they don't have any batteries. They have a magnet on the back and a hook that comes out. And I guess he thinks this will be easier to work on cases if I can see in the dark cases. But I guess I'm going to have to take this apart. There's some screws on the back, figure out what batteries it takes. And we'll give those a shot in the future and see if that helps the lighting situation on some of these repairs and upgrades where I have a hard time seeing. And certainly the camera, if I can't see it, the camera can't see it, right? So you guys aren't going to see it. I want to revisit this upHere cooler, which is sort of my main point to today's video. And I want to try and wrap this up in about an hour or so, because Mike Smith would like to do a Tech Vets episode with me tonight, which again will air live here within about a half an hour after this video ends, if I can wrap this up early enough. If I go on too long, then it'll be too late because it's 3 hours ahead where Mike is, and we'll have to reschedule that for another time. So with that, I want to take this cooler back off. This cooler was completely inadequate. Although I like the way it looks, it is completely inadequate for this build. Now, somebody made a good point in the comments section and said, why would you put a $30 cooler on a $400 or $500 processor? Well, I get that. Unfortunately, when you're a technician and people are bringing you their systems, you don't have any choice or control over what parts they're putting in, what components they selected, right? They will have built it. They say, look, I followed everything. I did it just like you said to do, except for, using the parts that I use. And now I'm reaching out to you because I can't make it work, or it's overheating, whatever the situation is, right? So I don't know why people do what they do, but this is not uncommon for somebody to buy a cooler for the wrong reasons. In this case, I bought this cooler just like one of my customers would. I looked at it, I went, wow, that's kind of cool. I think that would look nice in this case. I didn't look at what its TDP was. I didn't look at will this fit the socket? Yep, well, I'm buying it, $29.99. Now, I will say, for $5 more, I could have got a Hyper 212 Evo, which would cool this much, much better. And I'm kind of curious what the difference is. What makes this cooler so bad? All right, so the mounting technique on this cooler was quite unusual. Not terrible, just unusual, different, which isn't bad, just different. And if different is equivalent to or better than the existing methods, I got no problem with it. But if different is worse, we got a problem. So in the case of the mounting mechanism, I don't know that it's a mounting mechanism issue, although you can see there's quite a bit of play on this cooler. You can see how much it lifts up, but it does spring back down to keep that bottom of that cooler right flush up against the heat spreader of the CPU. So what I want to do is I'm going to take this back out, because clearly I cannot use this cooler on this build, which, not the worst thing in the world. I was curious, and fortunately I have a YouTube channel where I can play around with stuff like this on a build that doesn't belong to anybody, so if I cause any harm, it's at my own expense. And speaking of which, there's that G-Skill Royal Z RAM in there that I just highlighted in the Maximum PC magazine. Now, getting this cooler to get removed may be a little bit of a trick, but I remember I had some difficulty getting it on there, and I'm thinking that the fact that it moves is kind of key, though I haven't quite figured out exactly how. I'm I'm working on it blind here, trying to feel for the latch, and it is a very tight fit. Now, some people have mentioned removing the entire mounting mechanism, which is easier. So I'm gonna try that. I'm gonna pull the pins that hold the cooler in, if I can get my hands in there. And these are the little plastic pins that I had used during the install on the review. And I'm hoping to tack this video onto the review, because what I want to do is tear this cooler down and see what it's made of. I suspect I know, but I want to confirm it and I want you guys to witness it with me. Let's see. I know there's another one under here. There's another one. There's another pin. There it is. So again, I'm just doing that blindly, just feeling for those pins. So here's the cooler, there's the bracket. It was advised, somebody on in the comments had advised me to attach the cooler like this and then place it in and put the pins in to make the install easier. I don't know that that would have been easier, but certainly I could see how it could be. And then the problem is, getting this latch to release itself from the mounting plate, which even with the cooler removed is still a bit of a challenge. And you'll see how the metal is bent here, so that's part of this springing that I was trying to demonstrate about how much this moves back and forth. It's actually more significant than that. It's just awkward for me to hold it and try and do that at the same time. Okay, there, I think I got it released. So I'm kind of curious how this all goes together. One of the things that I can see, there's a radiator in there right behind the fan. And you can kind of see the top of the radiator. And I think I know why this cools so poorly, is the radiator's so tiny. But I'm curious how this comes apart. And I will break it if I have to get to it. But I don't see any screws, so I imagine it must snap apart in some way. Yeah, I don't see any screws at all. The fan, how's the fan attaching? I suspect there's got to be some plastic clips that are holding this in, and I may just end up breaking this to get it apart just so I can see what's in there. This is really a showpiece more than it is going to benefit you as a cooler. I think the standard stock coolers that come with CPUs that this would adequately cool don't require this. Like I said, the stock cooler that comes with the CPU is probably as good as, or maybe even better than this. They're just not as pretty. So I think for people who are buying this, you're buying it for its looks. And that's not to say that it would cause harm by replacing your stock cooler of a 3 or a 5 series Intel or Ryzen. But it'd just be an unnecessary expense that wouldn't benefit you practically, but would benefit you perhaps aesthetically. So looking at the cooler design, I can't help but wonder, there's a plate, there's a spring mechanism mounted to the surface here, the bottom of the cooler. So I'm going to grab a screwdriver, I'm going to take that out and see if that's holding anything in. And I'm going to use my JIS driver for that because it's a pretty fine screw. Small Phillips head on there. And let's open this, or remove this rather, and see what happens next. I'm not quite sure it's holding anything in, to be honest. I think it's just there for different mounting mechanisms for potentially different socket types. They could just sell you this piece to make it compatible if it was possible that it could cool something else that was in a different socket type. Maybe they could cool something on socket 7. Well, this just got a little more complicated. There's a small ridge that's locking this in place, almost making those screws unnecessary, which is kind of interesting. And it hasn't loosened the the heatsink that's inside of it. I'm very curious how this has come together. I can't visually indicate any release mechanism. It's all very hidden. I do see there's a couple of what I call wire hangers that appear to be holding the fan into the radiator. So it looks like somehow the face or the frame has to come off. Although how, I'm not exactly sure. I would assume that's on both sides. It does appear to be on both sides. It's a very curious design. The way it snaps together and the way it's held together is very well hidden in the design, which gives it this very unique, smooth, seamless look. And not having anything to go by, I'll probably have to break it to figure it out. Only because I don't have a lot of patience. I just want to rip it open. And I can see the releases for the fans. I wonder if I can get a screwdriver in there and release them, but I don't know that they'll come out. It looks like there's a couple of pieces here. One, you can see the radiator inside, right? And then you can see we have this top piece, which has a screen on it. And then you'll see there's a seam here. And then we've got each fan. So it looks like we've got a top piece, bottom piece, front fan, rear fan. And I would imagine that the top and bottom must separate first. That would then expose the fans and the latches, and then the fans would come out. But how this top and bottom separate, I'm not sure. So I'm going to grab some more tools and let's just try at it a little bit here. It's a $30 fan. I'm not worried about breaking it. I'm more curious about what size radiator is in there. Because I think that's the problem. A bigger radiator would mean you wouldn't need two fans. Right? A Hyper 212 Evo for $34.99 is just one fan. But the radiator is bigger than this. How much bigger? Let's find out. That's what I want to find out. Get somewhere here. Boy, something is really holding that together. I don't know if this piece may be getting in the way of removing, so I do feel like I need to take this bottom latch off, even though I'm not quite sure how it comes off. It looks like it's got to be spread open a little bit to get it around the ridge here. And to do this without injuring myself, without stabbing myself with the screwdriver, is a whole nother talent. All right, so that's the main piece that springs it on, that keeps it together. And let's see. Oh, are those tiny little screws? I think they might be. Way down at the very bottom, if we look underneath this cable, it looks like that's a screw. I can't really see it very well. It's probably way too big of a driver for that. I can't, it's so small I can't see it. Let me grab some glasses and a finer screwdriver, a jeweler's screwdriver, and see what's behind door number 1 here. Now I know I have a driver kit somewhere. Here we go. I haven't used this driver kit in forever. I think, and I could be mistaken, I think Nick Poverman in the chat room, I think it was Nick who sent me these, although I could be mistaken. Just a set of jeweler screwdrivers, which would be used primarily in smaller device repairs like laptops. But on occasion, you do get a desktop that will have a small screw here or there. Boy, those almost don't even look like screws. They just look like pins or mold injection points. Very interesting. I'm not quite sure what that is. I do, however, now that I have my glasses on, it looks like there's screws way down inside, right in there. Let's try that. See if that's any, maybe that's what's holding the two halves together. So we got one here. This feels better. I got a good feeling now. I think this screw is holding these two halves together. Yep. Oh, there goes the screw. So that's what I just pulled out of there, and there's, I'm sure, one on the other side. That looks like that. Set that down. Let's grab the other one. So this disassembly is not glued together, nor does it appear to be clipped together, which I'm grateful for. You'll see that case is already starting to separate. Okay, there's the other side. Now it should just easily come apart. There's the top. There's the bottom. Right, you with me? And then there's our fans on the relatively small radiator. And then I was mentioning you could see the hangers, the fan hangers. And how do those come out? It looks like maybe just using a driver to get up underneath and lift it straight out. Or maybe not. It's in there pretty good. There's got to be a way to get up underneath of it. I suppose if we went in with the radiator and then bent it up. Wow. I suppose it has to be pushed down in a way like this. And I need like two of them at the same time. And then I should be able to bend it around the radiator fins. It's a nice way to break a screwdriver. That is not the right driver to be using. I think it's something a little heavier duty here. There it goes. So all I'm ending up doing is lifting up and then pulling away And you can see there's the fan. I've got still the fan connected to the fan splitter. And then I'm going to try that technique on this side. Just get up underneath the fan hanger and just lift up on it if I can. You can see I'm marring up or bending the fins a little bit. The fan hanger on this side is not as wide. I don't know if you can see that, but that fan hanger goes from right about there to there, and the other side is much wider. You can see the little bar going across right here. It's almost twice the length. So going in from the short side is clearly going to be less work. And I guess I'll just try and do the same thing where I pull it out a little bit. And then while it's pulled out, I guess, I don't know, just start lifting up on it. I'm sure there's probably a better tool that'll do this, or a different technique that won't bend up the radiator fins so much. But again, I'm kind of in this for the education, not to save or rescue the part. I don't think this part is really anything I want to use. So I want to get my $29.99 worth to try and figure out how it all comes apart. And I hope I don't get to see another one anytime soon. Yeah, I'm bending it up pretty good. Well, I almost feel like you've got to come at it from the back like this and then pull it away and kind of lift it out. There it goes. So that's they're usually like on a Hyper 212 Evo or even the Scythe, the Mugen 5. These little, I call them fan hangers, they have a loop in them so you can get a finger underneath and pull them out. But this is what I wanted to get to, because this is the heatsink that comes with that cooler. And hold on, let me take my glasses off here. This is the heatsink. This is a standard Cooler Master. Turn it around so you can read it. This is a Cooler Master 212 Evo heatsink. This is the heatsink. Line them up. And that's going to be the main issue with why it doesn't cool very well. Now, if you look at the pricing of this cooler versus a Hyper 212 Evo, I should have those prices here. So this is the upHere cooler, right? You'll see it's $29.99, and you'll see how they've just put a fancy little cover around what is essentially a Hyper 212. And now let's take a look at the Hyper 212. You'll see that's only $5 more. And although it's not as pretty to look at, you can buy an RGB version for another $5 more on top of that for a $10 difference. But just look at the difference in the size of the heat sinks. And I mean, that's a big difference. And I consider the Hyper 212 Evo to be a fairly decent cooler. But I think if you just put one fan on this, you're just not going to be happy. It's just not going to work for anything, pretty much. So this is really all about the looks. All they're doing is they're putting hubcaps on a lawnmower. They've taken an ugly standard and smallish cooler, and they've hidden its ugliness and its diminutive size by putting a fancy wrapper around it. That's what you're buying. You're buying the wrapper. I suppose there's no technical reason why you couldn't do the same, just upsize it with a decent cooler. And you could certainly have two fans on a Hyper 212 Evo. It'll cool even better. but you might have some fitment issues with cases and motherboards hitting the RAM and such when you start getting into these larger size coolers. But there it is. That's your $29.99 cooler and your $34.99 cooler. Pretty, not so pretty. Doesn't work very well. Works fantastic. You know, for $48.99 you get the Mugen 5 whenever they return in stock, and you get an even bigger, right? If you look at the Mugen 5 cooler, just to give you some comparison, I've got a Mugen 5 heatsink back here, and I just want to show you how much larger it is. And of course, the larger that heatsink is, the less work the fan has to do. So the fan can move air slower. So it's not going to be as loud, nor will it be as demanding with, you know, requiring two fans, although you can, again, add an additional fan on a scythe cooler. And I know I've got an open one here somewhere. I just can't find it. Darn it. Let's see. Pretty sure I had opened one. Maybe I used it. Well, we'll just grab a new one. So here's a scythe, brand new in a box. We'll just take that. We'll figure this out. Because I want you to see the size cooler, the size of the heatsink, and compare it with the price. Okay. This is a $48.99 cooler. We'll just call it $50. This is about $20 more. You'll see it's got cutouts in it to make room for taller RAM on the one side here. This is a Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo, and if we line these up, you'll see the scythe is about the same height, but it's wider. I'm sure my hands are kind of covering how much wider that is. It's a bit wider, as you can see, right here, right there where my, well, you guys can't see that. Everything is backwards for me. See where my thumb is? That's equally on both sides, that the scythe cooler is that much larger than a 212 Evo. And then similarly, if we put in this cooler and we line that up again, now it looks like that. Okay, so from the front, $30, $35 in the middle, $50 at the end. Which one do you think does a better job? So each cooler in succession is larger, and by larger I mean it's thicker, and it is wider left to right. This cooler is a little bit longer left to right than the Hyper 212, which is longer left to right than the upHere cooler. And there you go. There's your dissertation and your basic 101 on CPU cooler basics. Now you can, if you are saying, well, gee, so what you're saying is I got to have an ugly cooler. No, absolutely not. There are RGB versions of the Hyper 212. There's RGB versions of the Scythe cooler as well. Be Quiet also has their Dark Rock series. And I thought it was interesting that Be Quiet has the naming convention that they have. So I wanted to talk to you about that for a minute, because I don't understand what a dark rock is. Oh, hold on. I hit the keyboard. I lost my video. I don't know what a dark rock is. So I reached out to my contact over at Be Quiet, and I said, can you explain Be Quiet's naming convention? Because it's almost as though it kind of feels like every word they wanted to use has been taken. CPU cooler, taken. Chiller, taken. Ice, taken. Arctic, taken. Just give me two random words. Rock, dark rock. Dark rock, has that been taken? No, trademark that. What's that got to do with CPU cooling? Just trademark the name, it doesn't matter. It's a name somebody hasn't used. Yeah, but what does it got to do with Be Quiet? Nothing. What does it have to do with CPU cooling? Nothing. What does it have to do with our company? with the image of our company. Nothing. It's just two random words that go together that haven't been trademarked. So that's my theory. So I reached out to my contact at Be Quiet and I asked him if he could explain. And I have to go back to read this email to you. So bear with me here because I'm going to be off camera while I read this to you because I don't have any other way to access it while I'm in front of the camera. All right, so where is it? Okay, so Be Quiet, when they name something as pure, that's their budget or essential. They can't even use the word budget. They got to call it essential. Then they have their mid-range, which they call premium. Okay, so essential is budget, premium is mid-range. So the essential range starts with the word pure. Right? That's the basic budget range. So budget is pure. Mid-range is straight, shadow, or in some cases silent. And then their high-end range is called dark, or in some cases silent. But when it gets to their fans, they might be called silent wings, but the silent bass are part of their mid-range cases. And then there's odd ones like system power or power zone that don't really fit into the naming scheme at all. So pure and dark basically are the two main things to notice with Be Quiet products. The pure is the budget line, the dark is the high end. All right, did you get all that? So that was the best explanation I got from a source that works with Be Quiet, and I appreciate that information, and my thanks for providing it. And then it's made it for me to then pass that little trivia on to you, so you guys understand the marketing names and conventions that are used by certain manufacturers. And that one just isn't clear. Like even when you break it down and ask them to explain it, the waters soon become muddied because they say, well, in general it means this, except when we're talking about this product line over here, it shifts meaning in cases versus in coolers. So the bottom line is that I think I'm right. I think they just ran out of names and they just picked a couple of words that weren't yet trademarked and said, that's the name of the product. I would love to get more in depth on that to try and figure out the marketing and the decision making behind that. Also keeping in mind that Be Quiet, I think they're a German, I'm not sure where they're based out of, but there might be a translation issue here as well, where maybe it makes more sense in the native language than it does translated out into English. Although again, I'm just theorizing this. A couple other contributions have come in. Let's take a look. Bill Thomas has contributed $10. Oh, I think I mentioned that one already. John Craig with 10 pounds. And John had contributed a bunch of solid state drives for the giveaways. So what I've done is I've moved all of those giveaway computers to the second studio, and I've been working on those the last few days, putting in the solid state drives, and it's weird to see a big mountain of solid state drives like that. And most of those came from John. I want to say they came from John Craig, and they've been sitting on a shelf. They will soon be given away, and not just from John. There were a couple other contributors as well, and I will acknowledge them again. I've got their names written down when we do the giveaway. So my thanks to you guys for helping make this possible. John says you have to go with what the customer requests, even if you know it sucks. You can persuade, but you cannot dictate, huh? No, John, that's not the case at all. I can absolutely dictate to the customer with this circumstance or this condition, and that is, you don't have to buy a computer from me, and you don't have to take my advice, and I don't have to do the work. So if you're a customer that I feel is going to cost me money and you're going to be a pain in my butt, and I advise you, look, let's make both of our lives easier. Let's go with these parts or this configuration. And the customer says, no, I don't want that customer. I'll say, listen, I hope you find somebody who can help you. I can't take this on. It doesn't make sense business wise. Now, if it's a customer that's been giving me a lot of business over the years, and this is an exception, that's a different story. But if a brand new customer, I don't know them, and they're dictating to me what they're going to have, it sounds like they should probably do the job themselves. Or they should find somebody else who they can educate that do it the way they want it done. I've got 29 years of professional paid experience in the trenches, and I continue to work each and every day for customers. And if a customer wants to dismiss the value of that, that is their right. And I can also dismiss the value of that customer. That is my right. So it's like going into a doctor's office and telling the doctor what your symptoms, well, telling them what your ailment is before you've been professionally diagnosed, and further, telling the doctor what treatment to prescribe you. Most doctors are going to say, no, I'm not prescribing you what you tell me to until I've evaluated you. And if what I've evaluated matches what you're saying, that's fine. But until I evaluate you, I'm not just going to blindly read out the prescription pad and then be held accountable for the potential consequences. It's similar to that without that much seriousness. I mean, lives aren't necessarily at stake, and I'm certainly not at the level of a doctor, but it's similar in that the customer's not always right. And because I'm self-employed, just like most doctors, I can say, you're a pain in the butt customer, so see another doctor. Looking through the contributions, Michael Haricos contributed $5. Says, greetings, Carey and the community. Great channel and computer repair and builds. Always. Thank you. Rock on. And that's from Mike in Cleveland, Ohio. Thank you, Mike. And I386 has contributed $5. He says, a dark rock is my head. There is a rock and dark inside. I was at the doctor's office the other day, and they run that temperature thing across my forehead. I said, does that thing detect brains? She goes, no. I know, that explains a lot. Samuel Ramos has contributed $5. Had a couple of contributions, generous contributions, including an Amazon gift card recently from Samuel Ramos. And thank you for your generosity and your support of the channel. Okay, so where are we at on time? About 4:30. I've got about 30 minutes, and there's a ton of stuff I want to do. I think the next thing I want to do, well, I was going to put this other cooler on. I've got this weird cooler that I picked up on Amazon at the same time I got the upHere cooler. It's now in pieces. And I thought I'd check this one out because it looks very similar, the heatsink shape and design, as Be Quiet's Dark Rock. And it looks a little bit thicker than the Hyper 212 Evo, but it's got RGB on the top and it's black. So I thought it might look good in here if it can keep it cool, which I think it can. This is from ID Cooling. And of course, it's the ever popular SE234A RGB. Yeah, that's right. SE234A RGB. Yeah, what's the big deal? It's not a dark rock. I mean, that name doesn't make any sense, but SE234A RGB, it just rolls right off the tongue. I mean, why bother coming up with a trademark name when you can just pick some random numbers and letters and hyphenate them? I mean, the options are endless. That's smart thinking. So I thought I wanted to try this out. It's got a TDP total of 200 watts, which should be more than enough for, what did I put in here, a 9900K or something? I don't even remember. This is a nice high-end system. It's got to be a 9900K. I've got a 970 Evo Plus 2 terabyte, one of the fastest solid-state drives you can get, along with that previously mentioned G.Skill Royal Z RAM. It's the diffused RGB. And a an RTX 2080 Ti with the tape still not cut on the box, since I got to get this thing running cool before I can even think about putting the graphics card in it. And then I've also got the system that I built, the little mini ITX system that I put in the Leon Lee TU-150 case, was sent back to me because it is randomly locking up numerous times a day, but we cannot find the problem and we cannot make the problem happen. It just happens whenever it decides to happen. That's the same motherboard when I went to install the Gigabyte 1 terabyte NVMe drive that it froze up, and I was blaming the Gigabyte drive because when I put an ADATA drive in there, I think, it works flawlessly. Then I shipped it off to him, and he says, well, yeah, it works, and it passes all the RAM tests, but it's randomly freezing. Like, I'll watch YouTube videos, and it'll just freeze while I'm watching the YouTube videos. I sent him some new RAM just to see. He put the new RAM in, same problem. So I think we've got a bad motherboard here. So what I've done is I've ordered a couple of motherboards that just came in today. UPS was just delivering as I was about to go live. And these are used product that Amazon was selling. I think somebody bought them and returned them. And then if that resolves the lockup switch, I don't even know how I'm going to replicate the error. When I shipped that system, it was fully tested, and he can test it. The Ron, my friend that I sent it to, can test it all day, and it passes all the tests. But he goes to use it, like he can game with it for hours, and it games 3-4 hours, no problem. And then he'll just be using the system at the desktop level or browser level, and the whole system freezes. That's just really upsetting. It's really upsetting, and it's an AMD system, which leads me back to talking about AMD motherboards. We talk about AMD as though the CPU is the end all be all of the decision making, but the CPU without the motherboard is completely worthless. And so I don't think we're putting enough weight on the importance of the motherboard. And furthermore, motherboard manufacturers are pulling a little stunt, and you guys may not be aware of it. It was a great article in this month's Maximum PC magazine that I want to read to you about this and make you aware of it. And we're going to hope for some change, maybe write to these companies and let them know this is not acceptable. Now, I know some folks in the chat have mentioned to me about some automatic overclocking that's happening in BIOSes, but I didn't quite understand the depth of it, and I thought it was just maybe MSI that was doing it, but it is not just MSI. And so I'm just going to read this article word for word. This article is written by, hold on, I have to find the article. Probably helps if I find the article first. Here we go. This is by Jared Walton, and it's Stop with the Motherboard Auto-Overclocking Shenanigans. And this is from August 2020. This is page 15, and I'm just going to read it aloud. Recently, AMD X570 motherboard makers came under scrutiny for potentially running the latest Zen 2 CPUs out of spec. This is nothing new, though the methods behind the Zen 2 cheats are slightly different. There are various opinions which distill down to two basic philosophies. One is that enthusiasts want their PCs to run as fast as possible, and any tuning that a motherboard manufacturer might do in a BIOS is fair game. The other take is that any auto-overclocking or beyond-spec tuning should be disclosed in the settings, and by default, a motherboard should run at stock. I'm going to agree with the second part of that, yes. With AMD's AM4 X570 motherboards, and let's be clear, this isn't the first time this has happened, not even for socket AM4, the problem is that some motherboards are reporting an incorrect current or amps value to the CPU. Now the CPU uses this value to determine voltage, power, and clock speed, seeking to stay within the specified limits. If the motherboard lies and says the voltage, is lower, then the CPU will be able to exceed the normal power limits and potentially run faster. This technically voids your AMD CPU warranty, just like Precision Boost Overdrive. Whether or not these hacks could cause a CPU to fail is more on TSMC 7nm lithography, might be more at risk than, say, 12nm and 14nm chips, but it would still likely take years for most CPUs to fail. Oh, sorry, I missed a whole sentence. Whether or not these hacks could cause a CPU to fail is more difficult to nail down. Long term, Zen 2 CPUs built on TSMC's 7nm it's a good word, lithography might be more at risk than 12 and 14nm, but it would still likely take years for most CPUs to fail. There are some other consequences, however. The biggest is CPU power use, which directly translates into heat. So if you're running a 4-core or a 6-core 3rd gen Ryzen, there's probably nothing to worry about. Even an 8-core Ryzen 7 3700X should be okay. But instead of 65 watts, your CPU could potentially use as much as 95 watts. Which is well within the limits of what the silicon can handle, and it's no big deal. But with a 105 watt 3800X, 3900X, or 3950X, power use could be substantially higher. We're talking 160 watts during stock operation, and at least one vendor, ASRock, has some boards that can hit as much as 210 watts of power draw, all on just the CPU. With proper cooling, it's still unlikely to cause any serious issues in the near term. However, some users have noticed substantially higher temperatures on high-end third-gen Ryzen processors as the Wraith Prism potentially struggles to dissipate 150 watts of power. Other CPU protections do kick in, and throttling may occur to keep the CPU below 90 degrees Celsius or whatever, except in this case, the throttling is probably just moving the CPU back towards running at official speeds and power. Still, 90C and higher temperatures are a serious concern, so a user might end up buying a more expensive cooling solution just to keep things running properly, which can mean spending $100 or more to cool a CPU that's running hot because of hidden automatic overclocking. I've seen test results where on some boards the stock performance is higher than what can be achieved with PBO. So PBO is Precision Boost Overdrive. And that means that motherboard vendors are overclocking via the amperage cheat more than you can get with PBO. Interestingly, enabling PBO appears to disable the error in its amperage reporting, so vendors were at least smart enough to know that double overclocking is a bad idea. In other words, turn the PBO on and have the motherboard boost the amperage on top of it. That won't work. One shuts off the other, and the BIOS controls that, which they didn't have to do that, but they did, so that's good. He says, but let me get back to the bigger picture. While AMD boards are the most recent example, they're by no means alone. Intel doesn't even report official all-core turbo clocks any longer, and this basically lets the motherboard vendors run free. There are some Z490 motherboards for the new Comic Lake CPUs that will run the Core i9-10900K at 250 watts indefinitely, assuming that your cooling can keep up. Perhaps even worse, I remember testing the first Skylake X CPUs a few years back and seeing system power draw during a Cinebench run eclipse 450 watts with a Core i9-7900X. Even liquid cooling failed to keep up, and I watched power steadily go up until the system eventually crashed. Frankly, I'm tired of these shenanigans. I understand the desire to make a motherboard appear better than the competition, and I'm not even opposed to auto-overclocking features. Just at least give us a way to run a CPU at fully stocked specifications, because sometimes we actually want to respect the official TDP constraints. Applause to Jared Walton for that article, and I think we need our voices heard on the ASUS forums and ASRock and MSI and Gigabyte and any other manufacturers that are overclocking the chips by default in BIOS setting and not making that obvious, conspicuous. We want that to be in your face, and we need that option to be off by default. This is for enthusiasts, and enthusiasts will know how to get in there and change it. You understand? Non-enthusiasts, this is all over their head. They don't know. They're not going to know what's a BIOS, how do I get in there, what is the setting I change. So you set it off by default and let the enthusiasts go in there and turn it back on. They're knowledgeable enough to know how to do that. But you don't give us no choice. That's really bad English. Don't give the consumer the option or the awareness to know that out of the box with default settings, that CPU is being pushed harder than it's specified by the manufacturer or is recommended by the manufacturer, and potentially voids the warranty set by the manufacturer, even though you, the system builder, followed every step exactly as you're supposed to. You did nothing wrong. You built the system properly, but the motherboard manufacturer decided that marketing was more important than the value of your components, or the cost of your cooling, or the noise that it makes, or the amount of power that it's drawing in that you have to pay for at the end of the month. And you're sitting there dumbfounded, wondering, why does my CPU run hot? Why is my electric bill so high? And then you find out your CPU is being overclocked. And to turn it off, how do you do it? Well, it depends on the motherboard maker. Again, you should be able to always go to default settings. That's what default is supposed to be. It's always meant your basics, no frills, no bells, no whistles, default, basic, simple, minimum, safe mode, okay? That's what default is. So I am really, or at least in this context, that's what default is. And I'm really upset to hear about this. So we can talk about how great AMD processors are on all day, as long as we're putting them into these motherboards that are playing these cheats, these tricks on you, the consumer, at your expense, your trouble, your time, your money. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. You've got to look at the bigger picture, folks. It's not about which processor's faster. It's how are they getting there. So we got to talk about reliability, noise, cooling. All of that comes into play. And and like I said, it's not just an AMD thing. They're doing this on some Intel boards, but primarily that's going to be the latest Socket 1200 boards. I'm not aware of this ever happening on stock 100, 200, or 300 series Intel boards. I could be mistaken, but if it did happen, it wasn't the normal. Like right now on the AMD boards, like all the X570s, as far as I know, nearly all of them do this. So be aware of it, and then do your research if you're affected by it. Sorry, I'm getting another drink. Do your research if you're affected by it to learn how to go into the BIOS and make the manual changes required. And know that if you ever update the BIOS, you will likely go back to defaults, which means you're back to overclocking. So you better write down the changes you made so you can go back in there and make them again after any BIOS updates. And on AMD systems, there's going to be BIOS updates. Rochester NY87 has contributed $25. He says, "Hey Carey, I'm just heading out to run some cables. I wanted to make a small contribution before I head out." Well, thank you. That's from David. I appreciate that very much. And maybe Dave and I are talking about doing a 10900K build, which still in the discussion process, but it seems like it'd be a fun computer, a high-end computer to build. Also, David submitted a video to me back in February about how to clone one NVMe drive to another using a Cronus TrueImage 2020. And I'm going to release that tomorrow, so you guys will have that to watch. I always like to, when a viewer wants to submit content to me, if you want to make a video that's, just look at the videos I make, look at what other viewer videos have done. If you would like to make a similar video and you're like, well, why should I bother? I'm only going to get 20 views. Give it to me. I'll air it. You'll get like 3,000 views in the first day at least. And if you want to use that to promote your own channel or promote your business, I don't mind. I don't care. And it's we're all a community here, and I'm happy to share my channel with you guys. The content has to be at the same level or better of what we've already got out there, but it's not that hard. Have some decent lighting, keep the camera steady, move it slow, try a microphone if you have one. It's not entirely necessary. Speak clearly, and yeah, I'm happy to share it. So my thanks for all the support from Rochester NY87. Do you guys have any questions for me? We're at, I should probably wrap this up here in the next 20 minutes, so I don't really want to start the cooler install. And I'm thinking, I need to test the video card that Mike sent back, but I'd like to test it in this rig, which I can't do until I get the cooler in. So I think I'll put both of those projects off for another day when I have more time. So if you have any technical questions, I'd be happy to address them. Don Miletis is in the hospital. So Don, I hope you're doing well. I hope a speedy recovery, and good to see you, my friend. Where is the Coca-Cola? I enjoy Coca-Cola. I like it a lot. But when the summer hits in Arizona and we're over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, we're in the mid 40s Celsius. It's very, very hot. It doesn't quench my thirst. I might have one Coke and I'm just done. Like, it doesn't do it for me. Then I need something else. I need water. I need Gatorade. I need something to rehydrate, because just walking outside to check the mail, I'll come in covered in sweat. There is no cloud in the sky. It is a brutal hot sun with no wind. It's like walking into an oven. It is oppressively hot, and it's everything I can do to hope that I stay inside, that my air conditioner works. There's been a couple of summers where my air conditioners failed and I had to learn how to fix an air conditioner because every AC repair company couldn't book me for days or weeks. This house is unsleepable with no air conditioning. Any place in the valley, in the Phoenix area, is unacceptably warm without some form of cooling, whether it's an evaporative cooler or traditional AC. A fan isn't going to do it. A fan just moves air around. If that air is cooler air, it feels good, but if it's hot air, it doesn't feel good at all. It doesn't lower the temperature of the room. So I had to learn how to fix it myself. So I've had twice now to fix this air conditioner, and it was 2 years ago, I think yesterday exactly, that I replaced the fan motor for the second time. And this fan motor is now 2 years old, which has already outlasted all the other fan motors I've had. So hopefully it'll continue to run. Usually when the AC breaks, it's usually in August when we not only have the heat, but we also have humidity. And then it's really, really bad. But if we had some wind, if we had some clouds, then 106, 108 degrees Fahrenheit is not too terrible. When you start getting to 111, 116, even the wind and clouds don't help much. But I will say they do help. So if you don't have the wind and you don't have the clouds, it's just a bright, hot sun beating down on you relentlessly. It's not enough to just have shade. You've got to have air conditioning. And the Coca-Cola, trust me, it doesn't quench the thirst, not to that level. That's more of a comfort drink when everything's comfortable. It's hard to be comfortable when the temperatures outside are in, 3-digit range. So that's why during the summer months, you will traditionally see less of the Coca-Cola in my hands and more of something else. Could be a bottle of water, which is probably what I should drink more of. A lot less sugar in it than this. Salvatore wants to know if I have any advice I can give him on building a computer to use as a Plex server. I don't think Plex is that demanding. You can pretty much build anything you want. For most people running Plex, they usually have it in a living room or an area that has the entertainment center, and you don't want to have a big computer with flashing lights or making noise. So we go with these HT or home theater PCs, and you might look at anything from an Intel NUC. Gigabyte had the Bricks line. You might want to look at something small. I don't know that it makes sense to build it yourself unless you're going to build it from spare parts. You could also buy some of these older off-lease Dell computers. They have the smaller models that are about yay big. And you can't really do much as far as, they use an awkward, weird power supply that I don't know where you'd get. You can't really upgrade them. You can put RAM and better storage, but that's about it. There's not a whole lot of room in there. But because of its small size and because it's off lease, it's relatively inexpensive and it's not too noisy, it's not too loud. But if you're going to go with a full on Windows based computer, you also have to put antivirus and get updates. So if it's just Plex you want, maybe look at something that you can add Plex to. I don't know if you can on like a Roku box or I know you can on a Synology NAS. You can put Plex on the Synology NAS. There are even some routers. I think some of the Netgear routers allow you to add Plex to them, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't know, some folks in chat might also have some ideas for you as well. Bob Shoemaker says he's getting his air conditioner replaced tomorrow. It's 12 years old. Yeah, that'll be about time, and I bet it's going to be quite expensive. Nick Poverman says he runs Plex off of his QNAP. So the QNAP and the Synology, they're network attached storage. They're a little box. You put a couple of hard drives in it. You can map a drive letter, call it drive letter Z, and you just save files to it that are accessible to any computer on your network. And then it also allows you to download apps and to add apps like Plex. Gary Weisenberger says, I had to put in 3 air conditioners last week. Ooh, that sounds expensive. An air conditioner on a house, like a central AC air conditioner, could run on a say a 1,600 square foot house, anywhere from I'd say $7,000 to $10,000, and it has to be replaced generally about every 10 years. But sometimes you can get 15 years out of them, 18 years if you're lucky. At least here in Arizona and Nevada, because they run a lot. Nick says, I run Plex from my Roku TV, getting my movies from my QNAP. Oh, I see. Okay. Well, I know on the Synology, you can actually put Plex on the Synology and you can download it. They have a little app store. What video can I go and see from your channel about the latest update on my contacts and glasses? So all of that kind of got shoved aside because of the pandemic. And so I don't really want to be dealing with the contacts. My vision's fine. It's just, as you've seen, reading, we're looking at things in fine detail up close. My eyes are not focusing the way they used to focus. And so the muscles in the eye that control the iris, they just can't flex, just like I can't flex like I used to. When I was a lot younger, I could probably put my leg behind my head. I can't do that anymore. And much the same way the muscles in the eyes start to atrophy a bit and they don't have the flexibility they used to have. And it can make close-up reading difficult. So I ended up buying a bunch of prescription reading glasses because they're better made than the off-the-shelf stuff you get at the department store. And they were relatively inexpensive, and I just try and put a pair in every room so I don't have to keep finding them. Like, where did I leave them? Just put a pair in every room and be done with it. And so that's my solution for now. Yeah, and I'm sure that the eyes will continue to degrade as I get older, and who's to say how rapidly and in what direction they go. But for now, the contacts were primarily designed so that one eye was able to have the magnification and the other eye was just normal. And that way I didn't have to require glasses for reading. They also could have fun with them and change the color of my eyes, to go like a steel gray, something like that. But again, with the pandemic, all that got pushed aside because that's just not that important. Not anymore. There's other issues at stake now. So if we ever get back to normal, I'm sure we'll see more on that. Nick says, yes, he puts the Plex server on the QNAP. The Roku only plays the movies. Gotcha. Yeah, Roku even makes the TVs now, right? What's that brand? TCL has Roku TVs with the Roku software all built right into the television. Michael Dane says, that's called old age. How dare you? If I could read that, I'd be really upset. When is the next Tech Vets? Well, if I can wrap this video up in about 10 minutes, the next Tech Vets will be in about a half hour to an hour from now. Can a 20-year-old computer case work for new motherboards? Some can and some can't. Obviously, you're not going to have USB 3 on it, on the case, but you'll certainly have it on the back of the board. Whether or not it depends on the case. If it's a pre-built machine, some of them you can, most of them you can't. But that's true of even modern day pre-builts. If it's something you built yourself 20 years ago, if it's ATX standard, it should work. Or micro ATX. Let's take a look at just looking at the comments, see if there's other questions I've missed. Feel free to ask your question again if I missed it. Jeff Jankowitz says, I have units at work that are 20 years old. The owners are too cheap to replace them. Well, it's costing them money using them. So I don't know that they're being cheap. It sounds like they're spending a lot of investment in time waiting on those things and maintaining those things. But that's their time and their money. It's your choice if you want to work for them. Benjamin says his router has USB and eSATA, and I think it can do file hosting. I'm not sure about Plex specifically, but it can definitely host. Yeah, most routers can. You can plug like in a flash drive or an external hard drive right into the USB port and use that as the source if you want. I think using Plex now is, I don't know, doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like downloading movies and music and stuff, you got to deal with the legalities. of it. You got to deal with the viruses that are often transmitted that way, and corrupted files and files that pretend to be something they're not. And then you can just, use a service like Netflix, Hulu for $10 a month and get anything you want, anywhere you want, anytime you want. Well, almost anything. Services like Spotify. I used to make a flash drive with all my music on it, and I'd have to take it out of the car and update it and put it back in the car. It's a pain. Having my Spotify playlist and being able to listen to it everywhere I go, not just in the car, but I've got that little Sony Bluetooth speaker. I'm in the mood to listen to music. Um, I bought a stereo that has a USB port on the front of it a few years ago. I don't even use it anymore. Now I want a stereo that's got Spotify built in. Streaming and sort of renting the music overall, I think, is just a better deal. Um, Sometimes some songs are extraordinarily hard to find, and trying to find a decent source, having to get a VPN, to grab the music, or spend 99 cents to buy it, but then you have trouble because it may have some sort of copy protection in it. You may have trouble moving it from one device to another. It just doesn't make any sense anymore to do stuff like Plex, in my opinion. It's just cheap enough to just use Hulu or Amazon Prime or a combination therein, and it's still much, much cheaper than basic cable. Nick says he's converted all of his old DVDs and Blu-rays. I think that's a complete waste of time because you could probably get every single one of those Blu-rays and DVDs on Hulu or Netflix or Amazon Prime without doing any of the work. You just push the button and it plays. But that's just me. Lloyd says he's got a laptop that will work, but it won't charge the battery well on. If you turn the laptop off, it will charge the battery. He's tried different power supplies. If a laptop's more than about 3 years old, they're probably not worth fixing. It's probably something that's going to get worse before it gets better, the beginning of the end, if you will. And I would just not try to fix it. Just live with it until you can't stand it anymore, and then treat yourself to a new in warranty laptop with a fresh battery and no problems. Once you're out of warranty on a portable machine, whether that's a phone, a laptop, a tablet, an iPad, what have you, um, they're generally more expensive to fix than they are to replace. So if you buy the extended warranty at the time of purchase, then at least you have a guaranteed working machine for the length of the warranty, right? Or the extended warranty. Unlike a desktop computer where you can open it up and swap parts and things like that, a lot of these tablets and laptops are sealed closed, something like a Microsoft service. You're probably not going to be able to open that without breaking it, and good luck putting it all back together. So definitely want an extended warranty. When that warranty runs out, whenever the machine breaks, if it's a significant break, we're not talking like just an OS reinstall, you're probably just looking at replacing it with a newer, upgraded model. Obviously, it'll be faster, probably give you more RAM, more storage, a nicer screen, a fresh battery, a new warranty. And when you calculate what that would cost to bring your current machine up to that level, would be financially significantly more money than just replacing it. If you're available to do the work and you've got the skill and the talent, it can be a fun little thing to do on the side, I guess. But if you're that skilled, why aren't you working and busy fixing things for money so that you wouldn't waste your time knowing you could be spending that time making money? You could be cheaper for you, again, to just buy a new one so you can get back to work quicker. But we all have our hobbies, I guess. All right, well, I guess we're going to wrap up today's live stream. Thank you to Eric Patterson, just contributed $5. He says, hey, Carey, found a few bucks for the cause. Right on, Eric. Thank you so much. Tani Alaramathi has contributed $4.99, says, I've sent you an email. Check it out when you're free. Will do. Thank you. And a quick shout out again to everybody who's contributed, from David Griswold, Randall Doms, Michael Dane, Darren Gilholm, Thomas Tidwell, Jeremy Kramer and Bill Thomas, Chris Keegan and David Griswold again, John Craig and Michael Rocco, I386, Samuel Ramos, Rochester NY87, Tani Aramathi, and Eric Patterson. Thanks, you guys, for contributing. Thanks to all my friends in blue for helping keep it civil in the chat room. The more popular the channel gets, the more it draws the trolls. I like that they don't last long here. I really appreciate that, so I can focus without that unnecessary distraction on the live, unscripted, and unedited content. And to everybody who's not yet blue, it's my goal to turn everybody blue. All you have to do is be nice. That's all you have. It's really simple. Be kind. If you've got something critical to say, either find a really nice way to say it or keep it to yourself. Otherwise, I don't care where you're from or what your gender or religion or race. I don't care about any of that. I just care about whether or not you're a jerk, because, as we all know, it's not race, gender, or age specific to be a jerk. So what I'm trying to do is create a community of like-minded individuals that can be kind to one another. And if you cannot be kind, hold your tongue. Stop typing. It's the easiest thing to do. And if you can't do that, if you're just too impulsive and out of control, then those friends in blue there are going to hide you from the channel so that we don't have to endure your abuse. With that, I'd love to turn all of you blue. And the way that happens is basically through supporting the channel and supporting each other. You're supporting the channel when you support each other. If somebody comes in the channel and says, hey, I just built a new rig and it's an AMD Ryzen 5 with a 1650. Why would you put a 1650 when you could have got a 1660 for 10? Don't do that. Don't question somebody else's build. You don't know the reasons why. So just say, hey, congratulations on your new build. Do you like it? And they might say, oh yeah, I wish I'd have got the 1660 though. Or they might not. They might just say, yeah, it's fantastic. It's the best thing I ever did. And share in their enjoyment, share in their enthusiasm. Don't rain on their parade. Who wants, oh yeah, that's my new friend now. I never met this guy before, but he came over here and criticized me, so now we're good friends. It doesn't work like that. So I want us all to be friends. So when you're in the chat and I see that you're being kind and supportive, I will acknowledge that. I will see it over time and I'll turn you blue. And if you're just watching and you don't participate in chat, it doesn't matter if you're blue or not, because no one can see you, so you have nothing to worry about there. I don't expect anything from anybody in blue to do any additional job. It's just my way, because there's so many people watching, it's my way for me to remember that person's a regular and that person has got a history of being supportive and kind to others. It's just a note for myself. It does give them the power to hide certain comments from other users, or to even hide users altogether. And if they abuse that power, I remove their blue status, because obviously that's not a kind and supportive thing to do. But if somebody's coming in here and they're intentionally being vulgar, or they're spamming about a product, I expect somebody in blue to jump in there and hide those comments, or at the very least make me aware of it. I've never removed blue status from somebody in blue who did nothing, but it does get removed from people who do too much. So again, it's mostly there just for myself to remind me who the regulars are, because there's getting to be so many people, it's hard for me to remember from day to day, apart from everything else I've got going on. So with that, again, thank you for watching, and thanks for tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed today's video. I thought it was pretty interesting seeing the inside of this upHere cooler, and ultimately, what it amounted to is just a fancy cover over a crappy cooler. I suppose that name wouldn't sell too well. That's going to wrap it up for me today. In about half hour or an hour, tune back in to this location. We'll have a live Tech Vets with myself and Mike Smith, and we'll get caught up on the trials and tribulations that Mike and I both endure running a PC repair business. So if you're interested in that, stick around, watch for the notification, or just come back in about an hour or so. Again, 45 minutes to an hour. And we'll follow up with the video card and the other cooler and a video very soon. Hopefully, I don't know if I can do it tomorrow. Might be Thursday. And Mo Al has contributed $50. Wow, it's a very generous contribution. Thank you to Mo for that contribution. And Mo is already a moderator, so see, there's a name I didn't recognize, but it's an unusual name. Thank you for the support. It's very generous. All right, and once I find my outro, I can wrap up. So stand by for a moment. What am I going to use? I think we'll just do the classic. All right, guys, I'll see you all very soon. Until then, bye for now.